Hey, everybody, we're going to pick up our conversation we started last week. So if you haven't listened to last week's episode, go back and listen to that episode, and then you can listen to this episode. This is part 2 of a 2-part series. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Friday Habit with Mark Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learn to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday.
Is there like a framework or some sort of like, outline, that one could follow as far as like when they think about, going into a situation where they're going to teach or going into a situation where they're going to sell or lead, is there some sort of framework that we can kind of follow to say, okay, this is how we should think about this? Like I'm going into a sales meeting, and what does that look like for me to tell a story, in a sales meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And so I'll take your example of the sales meeting and use that as I describe this, because I worked with somebody a while back who, and I didn't even think about this as a use for storytelling until he brought it up, but he was in sales and he said, I am using the framework you taught me in storytelling for my regular meetings with my leaders, because I used to just go and give them the information and they'll say, okay, why isn't this performing as well? Why isn't this? And why did you have this success? Because what I've started to do is quickly lay out the numbers, and then I'll say, let me share with you an experience that I had that shares why these numbers are this way. And he would tell them a couple of experiences that he had along the way with clients. And he said, the funny thing is, they don't push back as much. They listen to that and they go, oh, I get it now. I get why the numbers are what they are. And I thought that was just a brilliant use of storytelling. But when you're talking about structure, there's 4 things I'll bring out for you. You can go back to Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, which has 17 steps, but that's too complicated for my little brain. And I find it's just really, really complicated for people, particularly to absorb in telling like a 3-minute story. It's hard to get 17 steps in there in 3 minutes. And so the thing I always start with is, what's your intent? What's the purpose of you telling this story? So I'll use my friend as an example. His purpose was to help his leadership to really understand what the numbers mean in his sales. So he goes in with that intent. And then I look at 3 little sections that you can use to divide your story up. There's a current state. It's the introduction that says, this is how things are currently. This introduces who's in the story, what's involved, what's the goal, what's at risk. And then you get to the conflict. This is the inciting incident where something happens that may get in the way of that goal. And this is where people's attention is going to heighten a little bit because they want to know what's going to happen to resolve it. And then we call the 3rd section the change. And this is where something happens to either achieve the goal that you were trying to achieve, or that you failed to achieve the goal. But what did you learn in that process of not achieving that goal? So my friend in sales, sometimes his numbers are lower than expected. And so he'll go in and he'll tell the story of, I went to this client and this is what happened and this is what they ran into. This is what we're doing to overcome this. So while the number isn't there this month, I think we're going to be on track with it next month. And he'll be able to tell that story in that very simple 3-part framework: current state, conflict, and change. I'll just put those 3 C's out there. And that helps people to really just structure their experience into a story with a purpose in a very simple way.
That's really good. I really like that. Now, what do you find when you're talking with people as a common like roadblock or, a common issue that they like run into when trying to develop their stories?
It's some of the stuff that we've already talked about, which is, where do I find these? How do I come up with a story? What do I use as an experience? Or I'm not very good at it. And so really, again, the way to overcome that is to consciously look for those experiences that can be stories. And you can look for it from the standpoint that I talked about earlier of, what are the things you have an emotional reaction to? But you can also even look at it from the standpoint of, I need to convey this principle. Let me start looking around for an experience that I have that conveys that message. And it's a weird thing that happens. If you do that, it's like the universe sends you those experiences and they'll start popping up. But it's not really that there's anything magical about it.
Yeah.
It's just where your brain is focused.
Right.
Think about this. The last time you bought a new car, all of a sudden, didn't you start seeing that car on the road everywhere?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's because your brain's attuned to it now.
Right.
And it's the same thing. If I'm looking for an example to teach, let's say a corporate value around teamwork, well, I guarantee you within the next week or so, you'll start seeing examples of teamwork come up and go, ooh, there it is. There's the story that I need to tell. The other thing to do, if it doesn't pop up, you can always borrow from other people. Ask other people the examples that they've had and use their stories. It's okay to borrow stories as long as you don't try to make them your own. Yeah, but just attribute it to, hey, my friend Ben had this experience, and then you can share it that way.
So one question I have for you is, when I'm telling a story, I tend to find myself being conscious of other people's time. And like, I don't want to make this too long of a story. I'm thinking, all right, let me just skip all these details. Then I find myself making it boring because I didn't give enough detail, So how do you find that balance between, all right, I want to tell them the situation and what was going on, but not so much detail that they're like, okay, when are we getting to the action, or why are you telling this story? So yeah, what's your thought on that? And do you work backwards from a punchline, or how do you know how much detail to go into?
Yeah, this is a common problem that comes up too. What's too short versus what's too long?
It's like, oh, here comes Ben with another story.
Yeah. Oh, great.
Everybody refill their coffee before we get started.
Take a bathroom break first. Let's make sure we're all settled in for this. No. Yeah. And so there is that balance point of you need to share enough details to get the point across, but not so many details that you lose your people. And it all starts with, what is my intent in this story? Because if you're clear on this is what I'm trying to get across, that will help you edit. Because then you start looking at details and saying, does that detail serve that end purpose? And if the answer is no, leave it out. And if the answer is yes, then you need to include it. But that also helps you get to the point where you're going to land the plane, where you're going to get to the point. But in order to land that plane, you have to know what your destination is.
Do you actually think about that even in personal conversations? Does that actually flash through your mind? Like, oh, why am I telling this story? Or is it just so natural you don't really think about it?
In personal conversations, the purpose of the story isn't so much, I need to convey this point. It might just be entertaining or just to have fun, or just build the connection with the person. So no, I don't sit in my casual conversations with family and friends and think, how am I going to craft this perfect story in this? It's just going to be more conversational. But when I'm using it with the purpose to teach, lead, sell, and inspire, then I absolutely want to be intentional about why I'm telling that story so I can get to that point, and that the details I include in the story actually serve that point.
Yeah, that makes
sense.
It's
like when I go to a movie and my wife's like, well, tell me what it was about. And she's like, just don't give me the Labriola version. Just give me like the Cliff Note version.
Okay. Yeah. I gotcha.
Because I'll go into like detail. Then he went on this thing, and she's like, okay. I don't know.
Like, I just want to know what genre it was.
He said that. He said this. And she said that.
Yeah. It's like, okay, wrap it up. So yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense for sure. Well, I do feel like there's an element too that as humans, our brains are always connecting to stories. I feel like a lot of times, even with podcasts, and video podcasts, and like getting on YouTube, and I'll watch something and I won't even be interested really about what it is, but there's like the story that it's almost like they have you on a hook because you're like wanting to know how things resolve, or, so you're more in tuned, or you're more willing to give your time because there is like this open loop in your brain of like, oh, okay, well now I have to finish like watching this video or hearing this thing out, even though I don't maybe even care about what the content is, but because they've opened that story loop in my brain, now I'm willing to
what's going to happen?
Yeah, spend more time or invest more of my time and interested into like learning what's like how this thing is going to resolve.
Yeah. Yeah, right on. So, stories is how we as a human species make sense of the world. And so if we've got an open loop there that's like, ooh, this doesn't make sense to me, the story is going to hook you into it. And we can think back, almost evolutionarily, why that makes sense. This is how we've communicated for centuries, for eons of time. This is how we've made sense and related things to each other. There's more recent research now that we've got the technology to kind of get into our brains to see the impact of the brain or on the brain of well-told stories. And I'll go back to the facts versus story situation we were talking about earlier. When you're sharing facts with people, they found that it ignites about 3 or 4 sections of your brain. The audio portion, the part that's trying to make sense of things, and just a kind of a processing function. When you're listening to a well-told story, it also taps into your memory because you're trying to tap into, what's an experience I had that was like that? And it taps into about 7 areas of your brain. So think about how that's going to engage people more than just the 3 or 4 areas of the brain that you're getting with data. So we are wired as human beings to really want to understand, and stories are the way that we understand the world.
It makes sense too, because I feel like stories tap into empathy because you can empathize a little bit, whereas statistics, kind of like, where in my brain do I store this? It's like, I don't know. Like that's just some facts, But when it's a story, like you said, it kind of weaves into your mind and you have some empathy. And that's probably why also as a leader, I feel like if you tell a story of a customer experience that really happened to one of our customers, they're going to understand the importance of making this change and that experience that person had, rather than just being like, we had 2 customers, have this experience. It's like, okay. But if you can tell a story, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, right on. And it taps into their memory centers. So not only do they remember the story better, but think about this in terms of sales. They remember you better. And who do people buy from? People buy from the people they know, trust, and like. And storytelling is a great way to get people to know you, to trust you, and like you more. Now, you don't want to do it as a manipulative thing to say, ooh, I'm gonna weasel my way in with this person. But you want to do it in a way that really makes the connection to them about what the benefit is. And we try to do that sometimes with benefits and with features and with facts and information. But then it's just a compilation that's a comparative list with other people, and then people end up buying based on price. But if we can make that emotional connection to people about what it means to them personally, they're going to know, trust, and like you more, and they're more likely to buy with you.
Yeah, that reminds me of a really good local company here in town that does construction, but their tagline is rebuild and restore. And it talked about, we rebuild and restore forgotten homes and buildings. And like, to me, that's an inspiring story of like, hey, these are homes that have been forgotten, and like there's hope for the future. And the idea of restoration, it's like, it's not very often you see a construction company that gets you fired up, and be like, oh, that's inspiring. And I can see a story behind that. But even with that short tagline, it tells a story. And I've always thought about that ever since.
Yeah, there's a difference between rebuild and restore and we fix broken stuff. Right? There's power in those word choices because of what you're trying to convey to people. And so it sounds like they were very intentional about, this is the image that we want to convey. This is our culture and the who we are that we want to convey to clients.
And why. Yeah, why we do what we do. Yeah.
Yep. And that's what story helps with. It helps to get to the why.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I had a sales meeting the other day, and now that I'm thinking back on it, the guy I was meeting with he told me how he became, the executive vice president of the company, and how he went to the former owners and they were ready to, and he was telling me this story, and it instantly, I guess, it drew me in, and then also, I guess, felt like I trusted him more, or I felt like I liked him more, because he was like kind of being a little bit more vulnerable that typically you don't get in a sales meeting with, somebody who's trying to, pitch their services. It's like, but by him doing that, it allowed me to maybe put down a little bit more of a guard because it gave me a glimpse into like who he was and where he came from and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's interesting. Like thinking back to that, I'm like, oh, okay, that's almost like that was like a subconscious way that he connected with me. You know, it was just by opening up and sharing a little bit about how he got to his position and how long he's been with the company and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and without getting too geeky on the research, there's great research done by Dr. Paul Zak at Claremont Graduate College, and he talks about the different chemical changes that happen in our brains. And when you hear a story that you can relate to and you can relate to the person's experience, you get an increase of oxytocin in your brain. And oxytocin is known as the trust hormone. Oh. It makes you trust the listener. It makes you like them more. And so there's another power of a well-told story, is that it makes you more relatable to the people that are listening to it.
Yeah, it's like that line from Spider-Man, you know, Uncle Owen or whatever, where he says, "With great power comes great responsibility," and it's like understanding these things. You know, like you said,
now you got to get the name right because it's Uncle Ben.
Uncle Ben, yeah, Uncle Owen. Who's Uncle Owen? Oh, Uncle Owen
Uncle
is
Owen
Luke
is Star Wars.
Skywalker's uncle. Yeah, different uncle.
You got the wrong hero.
That's right. Yeah, nice. But yeah, it's like that idea of as you learn these things, right? Like how do we use them in an authentic way as we're going into situations and going into meetings and whatnot, because I feel like people can see through when we're trying to manipulate or, you know, trying to, use these and I think that obviously with marketing, right? It's like we're trying to write the right copy in order to connect with somebody or persuade them to take action, you know? And so it's always this idea of like, how are we constantly developing ourselves and, you know, how can we use these powers in order to, you know, do things for good?
Yeah. And you're spot on with that the authenticity will come through. If you're using storytelling as a way of manipulating people will sense the manipulation in it.
Yeah.
If you're using it as a way to really connect because you're providing value for them, they will feel that too, and the connection will be there. So it's like any skill. If your motive is not right in using the skill, it's going to backfire on you.
Right.
And so you use it for the right purposes.
Yeah, it's that Dale Carnegie book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. You know, it's like the title seems kind of, you know, sketchy, but then as you read the book, you realize it's just like, oh, remember someone's name and like all these things that are just courtesy platitudes, and you know, whatever makes us feel special is probably going to make somebody else feel special too. You know?
Yeah. And it's about bringing the humanity or the humanness out in us. And even those simple things, sometimes we lose sight of. We lose sight of making that personal connection with people. But that's where the power lies, is in those personal connections.
Yeah. So how are things been for you as far as, you know, being an author? Are you still teaching? Are you, are you all in on this master storytelling, building online courses and doing all this kind of stuff? Or like, what's life like for you now?
Yeah, I do a lot of the master storytelling workshops, but I also do some workshops for some other people. I also do some consulting on the side and developing content with other people. So I got my hands in a whole bunch of different things. I'm getting ready to write the next book that kind of takes it up to the next level. It actually ties to what we were just talking about leading with humanity. That's not the title of the book, but that's really the idea, is that we need to develop more leaders with their people skills, not just their position skills. We give people a lot of skills around budgeting and processes and things like that, but we teach them how to listen and to communicate effectively and recognize people as individuals, some of those personal skills that you were just talking about. So working on some new content there and doing some speaking from the stage. I'm kind of all sorts of different places. Yeah.
Do you like the speaking from the stage?
Yeah, I actually enjoy that a lot. It's an opportunity to get the message across to a lot of people and to really, again, make the connection for them in a way that will help them to achieve their goals.
Yeah. Now, did you transition from, you know, being in marketing? Did you retire or then decided you wanted to start a business, or were you kind of in the trenches and then decided you want to do your own thing and then kind of got into the book writing and And
there was kind of a weird transition there. I was in the trenches, and then I was teaching as an adjunct professor, and then I transitioned over into doing facilitation for another company, and worked with a really small company, a group of 6 people that we did this together, and transitioned from there about a little over 10 years ago into my own company, and then got the book going. And so it's just been one of those interesting routes that when I was 20 years old, there's no way I could have mapped it out. There's just no way I would have drawn this.
What did you want
to
do when you were 20-year-old? Did you want to be a rocker? Were you like, I'm going to join a band and, I'm going to be the next Edge and U2?
No, I got that out of my system in my teens. But really, at that age, I was seriously thinking about going back and teaching at a university to get some years of experience, and potentially going back and teaching on a university level. And I got a taste of that as an adjunct and loved it a lot, but the doors didn't open right for that for me. And so now I'm teaching people in the corporate environment rather than teaching in the university environment.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. What would you say have been some of the challenges over the past decade as far as getting your name out there and growing your business? And was the book a game changer as far as giving you something to kind of anchor onto and put yourself out there as an author, or, how has that been?
Yeah, it's one of those funny things. This goes back to something we were talking about earlier. I used to think, man, those people who write books, they must be so cool. They must be so awesome. And now that I've written a book, it's like, it's not that big a deal. It's just that perspective of stuff that you've done already.
Yeah.
But it really gave me a foundation to say, I think this is a skill that's underutilized, and here's the book that's the foundation for it. And it continues to be really popular, and we're growing in the workshop space as well, and helping people to really see this as a key leadership skill. You mentioned earlier, a lot of people are talking about storytelling in a lot of different ways, and we all have our own little niches in where we come in, but that also helps that other people are talking about it. I just had a friend contact me 2 days ago that someone that she works with said, hey, do you know anybody who does something on storytelling? We have a lot of people who are leaders who are just sharing a bunch of data, but I want them to be able to tell their stories effectively. And even those that have tried, they haven't been very good at it. Well, okay, so there's the need. And so she contacted me and got the connection going with this person, and we're going to see what we can build together. But the need's out there, and really one of my values is around helping other people and helping other people succeed. So this gives me a path to do that in a way that's different than doing it within a corporation.
Right. Yeah, that's nice. And then also there's the element of, being your own boss, so you can go out there and enjoy the wilderness and, take the time that you want. So,
and sometimes it's bad being my own boss because I'm too hard on myself, and sometimes it's bad being my own boss because I'm too easy on myself.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly.
So there's that balance that I got to come to.
Yes. Yeah. I think we all experience that, where it's that drive of all right, when to go easy and when to go hard.
Yeah. When do I need to take a step back and slow down a little bit? And when do I need to say, okay, enough slowing down, I got to step it back up.
That's right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Totally.
Well, hey, this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed hearing your perspective on storytelling and how, we can all use this when we teach, lead, and sell and inspire. So, I really appreciate that. Ben, what do you got for our takeaways?
All right, takeaways. A couple great things, Mark, that you said that really stuck with me. One was, if you're looking for a story to tell, look for any experience that you have an emotional reaction to. Another thing you said was using story can actually help increase the credibility of the facts you're presenting. You said to tell the story, first you need to ask, what is your intent in telling the story? Then work from there. And you need to think about the current state, the conflict, and the change. And then finally, you mentioned that storytelling is a great way to get people to know, trust, and like you.
Boom. All right, Mark Carpenter. Are you related to the Carpenters?
No, not in any way that I could ever figure out. Okay. I always wished, but no.
What is one action item that you could leave with our audience so that they can start the next week being better storytellers?
I'd say start with looking for those experiences that you can turn into stories. So think about the things that you need to teach, lead, sell, and inspire around, and then start looking for those experiences. And Ben, I appreciate you calling out, looking for those moments where you have an emotional reaction to something, and take note of them. Don't just let them pass and go, oh, that was interesting, but really take note of those and think about how you could use this to help achieve your goals and to teach, lead, sell, and inspire.
Love it. Get out there and master storytelling. Mark, where can people connect with you? They can follow you online, maybe join one of your online sessions.
Yeah, so the best place to start is with our website, master-storytelling.com. You have to have a little dash between the master and the storytelling to get to us. We have some free resources there, including a document we call the Story Catcher, which kind of cues you to look for these experiences and to jot them down and then craft them into stories very intentionally. The book is available on Amazon in all the different formats. You're also welcome to follow me on LinkedIn. I'm out there on LinkedIn and share stories out there pretty regularly. And come join us in one of our workshops if you want to really get deliberate and intentional about making this a skill that you can use on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing with us and our audience.
Great to be with you. Thanks, guys.
And thank you for listening to The Friday Habit. Head over to thefridayhabit.com to find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. And at the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit system that will show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business.
And if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and subscribe and leave us a review. If you have any questions for us or topics you want us to cover, send us an email at hello@thefridayhabit.com.
That's right. And remember, until next time, live every day like it's Friday.